Lebanon, the last census of population was conducted in 1932. However, CAS conducted several census of building, dwelling, and establishment. Last one was in 2004. And the main objective of this census is to have a frame to our surveys. For in our survey also, how we define the thematic of each survey, we are serving two main, if you want, category of work. The first one is related to national accounts, and the second one is related to consumer price index. For that, there's a survey, budget survey, which is conducted. The last one was in 2012, and the main objective of this survey is to see what are the weight of each division of consumption for each household. And this is very important to compile the consumer price index. And also, it's important for national account to make some economic survey and data collected from other ministries to compile the main indicator of national account. But also, CAS answer the request for coming from ministries and public administration. So, for example, we conduct several social statistics related to poverty, related to energy. For example, for water, we make for the Ministry of Energy a census of subscribers for all subscribers in the main cities of for water office, mainly the main cities in Lebanon. Also, we conduct several surveys with the Ministry of Finance. So here also, to answer this question, that we are answering the request of all ministries and public administration ask for CAS, and this is by law, this is the role of CAS. Also, CAS answer the requested survey requested from international organization, like for example, UNICEF. We have a survey conducted each 5 years called Mixed Multiple Indicator Cluster Surveys. For example, for LIRAB, we make also a similar survey called PAPAM. We conducted recently a survey for labor force survey with ILO and etc. So also what I'm trying to mention here, that the definition of each survey, it's depend of the program of CAS, but also what other ministries and international organizations ask for. The question here is how to describe the Mobilized survey tools and what are the limitations. In fact, all our surveys, it's either conducted via our own sources. So like CPI, for example, we have data collectors and they are going daily to the market to collect data. So here the resources coming from CAS. But almost of our survey, it's funded by the international organization, especially during the last 10 years. The limitation, we have a lot of limitation, especially now. We have limited staff and the resources available, limited data access, limited budget because of economic situation and devaluation of the currency more than 85%. And sudden and unprecedented circumstances created by the pandemic and the social distancing requirements. So CAS, we were obliged to cancel all the surveys, especially the surveys need to have a face-to-face interview. So we cancel all these surveys. To answer the question, how do the institutions build collaboration with other institutions, and on which base? We have here many dimensions of collaboration. The cooperation with ministries. So CAS provided user with evidence-based information for decision making on the national level. And we have several best practice collaboration with the Ministry and Public Administration were achieved. I will mention some of them. For example, in terms of survey and training, I will show you now in our website the number of collaboration made in this area, and also the area of data exchange and data collection from administrative resources. So in our website here, we can see, if you enter to our website, there is a special topic called CAS cooperation, where you can find here all our cooperation with ministries in which field and what kind of data we have and what kind of.
Sorry, Dr. Abdullah, can you put the large screen? Can you put play mode? Because the table is not clear.
Yeah, this is it's only an image. You can find it in our. It's not clear, but because it's a snapshot only, so you can find the information inside the link here. The most important here is CAS cooperation, and you can find this in our website cas.gov.lb. Also, we have a lot of best practice done during the last year, especially with international organization, UN agency, EU, IMF, bilateral collaboration like ISTAT, especially ISTAT. Now we have a big cooperation with them. I will show you later because we have joint program that serve to create a modernized statistical information system inside CAS using the technical assistance of ISTAT. Also, we conduct a survey with PCBS, and PCBS is a Palestinian Bureau of Statistics, and LPDC, which is Lebanese and Palestinian Dialogue Committee, which is in La Serai. So in this project, it was a best practice because we worked together, and we were also in collaboration with the main international organization, where we conduct a very best practice project where we have two countries that doing one census in one place. And it was really the best practice in everything, the technology used, the way we work, how we exchange our experience together was really best practice. And we have a report published in this matter. So here we can see also our cooperation with EU in the MedStat project. This MedStat project is a project where we create a Mediterranean standard information system, and Lebanon is one of the main countries of this project. And the importance of this project is that we involved with us all our stakeholders here in Lebanon, ministries and administration, where we exchange our knowledge to build this information system. And it was also a best practice. Also, I want to take the opportunity to thank all our really stakeholders and team work in national and international community. UN agency now play a very important role to support CAS in the building of a new statistical master plan. And it's really, we can feel this support in everything. And the last one was with LIO. You can here see this publication. It's the first time where we conduct a survey in a CASA level with about 38,000 households. And we compile socioeconomic indicators in the CASA level. Now the question, how the CAS team define and set the spatial unit. This set of questions, I will answer them one by one. So how we define the set of spatial unit of the survey, we are using the administrative border. This administrative border is defined by the Ministry of Interior and the Army. and especially in the 3-level محافظة, Kaza, and CF. For our own classification here, we are talking about enumeration area. So we are using our census in 2004 to delimitate this small area, which is called islet. Also, we have some area for main cities I mentioned. We did this with Ministry of Energy. Now, you're right. The urban dimension is absent from all our publication because the main reason, there's a lot of reason, but there is no classification in Lebanon about rural and urban classification. This classification does not exist. And why it's not existing until now? Because we don't have the census of population. And it's the main criteria to define this, this classification. But also, now we are talking about new classification, not only urban and rural. For SDG purpose, we're needing a new class. There is a need for new classification, and now we are working with Union for Mediterranean to see, and we did several training how we can use this classification, like for example, the cities, the town, etc., the village. So now CAS is producing data on housing, how to describe the already produced data in this field. Our database, our frame, it's old. So the census was done in 2004. For that, when we are selecting our islet in our surveys, we are doing a new census for all household and all residential area needed to update our sample to have an accurate data for surveys. And for that, there is a new census. We are planning to do it, but unfortunately, because of this situation, everything is stopped. Now, the plan of CAS as an institution, the question here, what are the future thematic method and collaboration considered by the CAS? I mentioned the Eastern cooperation, and one of the main components of this cooperation was the GIS and how we can create a good and acceptable GIS and taking into consideration all these concepts, I mean the geographical concept in this system. And we start, it was a lot of missions. The last one was done, and based on this missions, we identify the need, and we are planning to continue this work. Now, another really future and good practice was done is the work with ESQA, UN ESQA, because we use the new technology, and it was a best practice in the region, and this project was selected as one was selected between 1,260 projects worldwide to get the award about the use of big data in official statistics. And there is a report, you can see here the link about this report, and you can find all that methodology used. And also now there is a new project that will be finished, I think, this month. It's the use of big data to measure the policy effectiveness during the COVID pandemic. Also, we have a good cooperation with UNDP in terms of technical assistance, in terms of statistical master plan, business continuity plan. Really, UNDP was very supportive for us during this area. I am trying to mention the main, a lot of cooperation, but just I am mentioning the best practice. Also, we are working with CDR with this cooperation with Union for Mediterranean to see how we can make this classification urban-rural. And thank you for your attention. I hope I answered all the questions from your part, and I am ready for any other clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Right on time, really sharp. I will leave the question till the end of the presentations. Now we will have Mr. Asad Zibian from Ghirbal Initiative. Asad is the Executive Director of Ghirbal Initiative, bridging the gap between citizens and Lebanese administrations by promoting data accessibility, transparency, and accountability. He's also co-founder of 2015 Youth Think movement, protesting the garbage crisis. He runs Eureka, a Beirut-based communication agency, and he won the ArabNet Creative Combat. Asad, if you want to share screen, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Roba, for organizing this. Thank you for the other speakers and for everyone who's joining and listening to our session today. As Roba mentioned, I co-founded Ghirbal Initiative back in 2018. It was decided to be established after the Lebanese government, the Lebanese parliament passed the Access to Information law. And since then, we've been working on issuing an annual report that shows the compliance of Lebanese administrations to Access to Information law. So basically what we do, we send a request form, similar form for all administrations. Now we're tackling 200 administrations every year on the national level, including all public hospitals and all governments, as well as the directories and other private companies that run public institutions. And then we issue a report that I will be sharing my screen and showing for you now.
Dr. Abdullah, can you stop sharing your screen so can Asad?
It's fine, it's fine. It works. So as you can see, I'm sharing my screen for the elghirbal.org website. If you go to our publication section and you click on reports, people are able to see all our 3 annual reports that are titled Transparency in Lebanese Administration. So this is the last version in 2020. I'm opening it right now. What you can see in this report and a full analysis and a summary about our data. And then people can actually go and see the PDF format, which they can also download as well. And in this format, they will be able to see after the table of content, a small graph that shows out of the 200 requests, for example, that we sent the last year, we received 95 answers, which is 47.5%. 54 of them were post the legal time limit, which is 15 working days, and 41 were within the legal time limit. Out of these answers, we were able to obtain 47 positive answers, 17 answers which were incomplete, and 19 negative answers. And when we say positive, it means they provided us with the data we requested. And this year, we've asked for the state annual state financial statement that they have. And the people can also see on this annex all the names of the administrations. When did we send them the report? When did they reply? And whether their answer was complete or not. And then we go into showing each administration by itself. For example, this is the Lebanese presidency. We send them this is what we sent them. This is what we received from them, an analysis about whether they provided the information or not, and then a timeline that will show whether they provided the information or not. So when this is done, as I mentioned, out of the 200 administrations, we were able to obtain around 60 answers. So the answers we got, we transformed them into a separate report, which I'm opening as well here. And this report will shows the actual spending of these administrations. We do a full analysis of their spending in terms of budget lines, how much of the money was allocated or actually spent, not allocated. for staff, how much of the money was spent for projects and other forms. As soon as the PDF opens on the screen, you will be able to get a glimpse of what I'm talking about. So in the beginning, we have a full list of the administrations that answered us. By the way, this is the only report we have only in Arabic. All our reports are bilingual, Arabic and English. But this one took a lot of time, so we couldn't do the translation in proper timing. And as you can see, all our reports are very visually user-friendly. People can directly understand all the spending of every administration they come across. And in this report, we've been able to monitor the answers of the spending of these administrations in 2018 and 2019. But other than doing a report, as I mentioned, we've issued 3 annual reports, and for every annual report, there is a sub-report next to it, which is the data that was collected. We visualize it and we make it accessible for the public. We also create guides. So we have a guide for the access to information law. So if someone doesn't know about the law, they can easily go through this guide and understand all the articles of the law in a very visual format way. And it's also bilingual. We've also issued recently, 2 weeks ago, another guide that helps the people understand what is the administrative judiciary in Lebanon, what is the state council, and everything that is, how many judges are there, how many chambers, how people can press charges, if they need the lawyer or not, how much timings shall a lawsuit take, and other data. Also in our report, there are special customized reports, such as the number of the staff in the ministries in the government, not all the administrations, only the ministries. And these data were collected from the NSSF, the National Security Social Fund, and from Ta'unit Mawazafit Dawli, the government staff cooperation. And we also have another report, which was also recently launched, that tackles monitoring the same administrations, but this time, instead of going and requesting data from them and see if they provide it or not, we also monitor if on their websites they're actually being proactive in publishing special articles that the access to information law says they should be publishing. So we decided to evaluate them according to 5 criteria: publication of activities, publication of annual reports, publication of the budget and annual financial statements, publication of all the financial operations that exceed 5 million Lebanese pounds as the law obligates, and publication of all the decrees, circulars, and memoranda with the explanation why they took this decision. Unfortunately, most of the Lebanese administrations scored very low. I doubt there were more than hand-picked administration that actually scored 3 over 5 or even 4 over 5. None of them scored 5 over 5. That's a misfortune. And this is something that by law they're obliged to do. Other than the publications we work on, we also allow, I'm sorry, Dr. Ziad, but we do actually some of the CAS work, and we make people's life with data easier by providing them access to a lot of public data. For example, as you can see on the screen, I'm sharing with you the state budget. If you don't know how the budget in Lebanon is issued, it is basically issued like this in the National Gazette. In one of the issues, people will be able to go through either a PDF or a printed format, and they will have a suffering in discovering how much money is allocated for every administration, because one, it goes along several pages, and it's also divided into section 1A, section 2A, and section 2B, and it will take around an hour at least to understand the money allocated to every administration, and that's for 1 year. So instead of that, I use this copy of the law as my mouse pad, and I think it's much more useful to do with this paper. And instead we give the people full access, as you can see on the website, also bilingual, because in Lebanese government you don't have it in English. People are now able to navigate through this page. They can see every ministry, how much they have an allocation from the total budget, how much the money was allocated for them in 2017, 18, 19, 20. We don't have the 2020 2021 budget yet, but as soon as the parliament passes it, it will take us a week and you will have it public on the website. It's also searchable, and people can go through breakdown. So for example, Ministry of Education compasses 10% of the budget. When people go down through that data, they can see every directory, the Lebanese university. They're also clickable. They can go down to every consumption line they have. And then if there is a line, for example, if people want to look at, for example, stationery, because in every administration, there is a small line for stationery. It's usually around 3, 5, 10, 20 million Lebanese pounds, which doesn't seem to be a lot. But if you actually click on stationery and you search it, then suddenly this line is repeated 95 times all over the budget, and it becomes a total amount of 7 billion pounds, which is around $5 million on the exchange rate of 1,500 Lebanese pounds. And that's huge for only stationery, for example. For fuel transportation for employees, it goes up to $120 million a year. And you can actually navigate through this data. The same thing we do is working on the Ministry of Finance and the Banque de Lebanon data. Instead of giving the people the ability to check them on PDF format, which are published either monthly or annually, and people cannot track the changes in them. As you can see on the screen, this is the MOF data. We picked all the biggest important indicators in it. And now we can allow the people to check, for example, revenues. They're able to check it on a visual format with a table, and they can see it on a yearly basis, monthly basis, and at the same time, there is a table data underneath. In 2 weeks, we're also releasing, for all these data sets, a small analysis, a political, social, and economical analysis, why these deviations have been happening with the data. So please bear in mind, these will be published soon. The same, as I mentioned, applies for BDL. For example, everybody is talking about inflation in Lebanon, and there is nothing more beautiful to show it by more than this graph. This shows the currency in circulation outside BDL, and we can see the huge jump that happened in the last 18 months in Lebanon of how much money is being printed by the Lebanese central bank. And all of this data is actually government data. They are releasing the information, but we're making it easier for the people to navigate and find and address. The same thing that we are doing with the custom data. And for example, if you go now to the website of the customs, people cannot search but by 1 year or by one product or by one country, and they are not able to understand what they're searching for, because there is something called the HS, رقم التعريف الجمركي. So they need to know each code stands for what item, so that they can understand how did we do an import and export on this item. On our website, we made it much easier for the people to be able to see the custom on a flow map, on a world map, which is very visually, very easy to search and navigate. And now all it needs is people, as you see on the map, the screen, you can click import or export. You can click any year. You can type in a country or several countries, and you can type a category or several categories. We will take a homework and see, for example, how much we imported in 2018. I will keep all the countries, for example, but I will say we want to see how much we imported buttermilk, and then I want to see combined to that milk and cream. And then all we need to do is click on the search button. It takes 5 seconds. After these 5 seconds, people are now able to find on a visual map how the lines of import are happening. This map is zoomable. And then down there, they can see how much was the total of this import of these items and how they changed from 2011 to 2020. So we started with $40 million. It went up to a peak in 2018. But then after the financial collapse in the country, the import of these items went down to $6 million. We can find which top exporters were. So for example, in this example, we have Saudi Arabia, France, Denmark, Netherlands, Germany, and so on. And it's super easy. Just click on any search button. It makes the people life easier. If they are business owners, they want to understand the import and export trend. If they're policymakers, if they're researchers, or even if they're political activists that they want to look up on something that is fishy. For example, exporting gold from Lebanon that jumped in 2019 and 2020 to reach $1 billion export to Switzerland, for example, which constitutes 26% of all our exports. The same data we worked on categorizing all the loans and the grants that the Lebanese government has received from 1990 to 2020. We've also allowed people to check these loans and grants. Loans and grants directory. I'm opening it right now. What we able to do to get this data, this is a data that's not published anywhere, but bits and pieces of it are published. How? When the parliament convenes and they decide to give the government the right to sign an agreement for getting a loan or getting a grant, after the meeting, it is published in the National Gazette. So what we did is we went through 1,600 different issues of the National Gazette, and we took out of those all the times that there was a mentioning of a grant and the loan, and we were able to put them in this easy access chart where people can see type of the grant, who's the donor, who's the recipient, which body in the government. We also created a sector analysis for this, the year and the amount. And definitely there is the documentation. If someone wants to make sure that our data is valid, they just click on this item and it directs them to the actual excerpt of the National Gazette, and they can see based, so for example, this is one of the grants that we're giving to the Lebanese army. And to make people's life easier, if they don't like charts, we also made this loans and grants Sanskrit chart, which means it's very visually easy. So I can easily say, I want to see how many loans we received in 2003. And it's very visually shows it came from the World Bank, an amount of this much that went to, for example, the Council for Development, يعني مجلس النماء والأعمار and Reconstruction. And it's made easy. Same applies for a lot of data, such as the bank's properties in Lebanon, how much land they own, but not all the banks, only the top 10. How much the political figures in Lebanon own in land. And this is a joint project that we're doing with the يسقط حكم الفاسد program on Al Jadid. So people can filter looking at these properties on map, whether by political party or politician or districts. And the moment they click on it, they can see, for example, this clan, which is the Future Clan, they own 757 properties divided on 37 affiliated politicians over 16 districts. They can zoom in on the map. The moment they find a pin, they click on it. They see the lot number, the area, and how many shares they have out of that lot. I think I'm taking a lot more than my time. I have a few things to end with. We also work on local administrations and monitoring the municipalities and federations. So on this geographical distribution for local administrations, it's very easy to click on any kaza. And the moment you click on it, you can see which municipalities have given us an answer or denied it or did not respond. And in case they submitted their full information, it's clickable. You click on this icon, and you're able to see a small analysis of what we collected from them, their income, how did it change year by year from 2015 to 2018, their expenditure, how did it change line by line, and with the visual representation, and in the end, a waterfall for the profit or the losses, so we can actually check if this municipality was making money or losing money in every year. Other than this, we have our own content, which we call it the grains. So these grains are actually highlighted stories from the data we collect that we are able to publish for the public. We also have our own produced animation videos that if you watch them now, there are 5-6 videos. There will basically be a summary of all my intervention on the website and the content we have. We also have our media partnerships, media coverage, the ability for people to see a timeline of our work since our inception till today, and an ability for everyone to leak a document in a very secure and private way without asking for their email, phone number, or anything. All they do is get a file, throw it to our database, we will have it and we'll deal with it. The final thing I want to finalize with is we created a directory for the Lebanese administrations. So, for example, you all know Zomato, and on Zomato you can pick the name of the restaurant or ask for certain data, and then you open their name, and you will be able to see their menu. So we did the same, but adapted for Lebanese administrations. So I'm gonna take you just say statistics, for example. You do a search, you have these 3 administrations that have to do with statistics. So CAS is one of these administrations. You click on it, you have an overview about them. Where are they located, directions to get there, phone number, website, email, and the recent news and data. You also have Gherbal assessment to CAS, so because we've been sending them requests every year. So for example, in 2020, they provided us with the final accounts of their financials. In 2019, we did not get the answer. In 2018, we also did not get the answer. We also did the same evaluation for their websites. They actually publish their activities. They partially publish annual reports, but not every year, and partially publish some of the decisions, instructions, and circulars and memoranda. We also have a tab for the officials. So we have the Director General, and we have the focal points that are appointed for access to information. So if someone else wants to send them a request, they can find their names. And we have a tablet, which is access to data, where all the data of CAS is here. So you can see their semi-annual report in 2020, their price index from 2008 till 2020, their other publications, their decisions, their statistical yearbook, statistics in focus, thematic team, CPI index. You just click on them, you get a Drive file where you can download all of this data, you can access it, and you can read it in all languages. And every time they upload anything to their website, not only CAS, but all the 200 administrations, they automatically find their way into our platform. So what we built, basically, we built an e-platform, which the government should have been doing in this small section of the site. But we're continuing, and we're also launching 2 new projects very soon. We're collecting now data from all the administrations on the contractors they've made 20 years.
If you can close, Asad, please, because you are very, very late.
And the second thing is we're also starting to monitor all the tenders and public procurement starting in 2 months. And this is all I have to say.
Thank you, Asad. It was really, really interesting. We are really running out of time. We'll now go to a smaller scale, go back to housing with Abir Sa'su. Abir Sa'su is an architect and urbanist, co-founder of Public Works, a research-based studio that addresses spatial inequality in Lebanon. The studio initiates multidisciplinary projects that study, shape, and implement counter strategies to urban planning and policymaking in Lebanon, with a focus on how neoliberal urbanization has destroyed residents' livelihoods, housing, and surrounding environment. Abir, if you want to share screen, and Asad, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Yes, thank you, Ruba. ومرحبا جميعا. I will try my best to be brief. So I'm going to speak today about, I'm going to tackle the topic of the seminar through 2 projects by Public Works. The first one is a project that stems on the work we've been doing on the housing sector since 2015. Of course, we're all well aware of the existence of a housing crisis in Lebanon. In fact, the housing landscape has always been described as unaffordable, with precarious conditions, and there's a huge mismatch between supply and demand. And of course, this is the result of decades of policies that were an essential part of serving the interests of capital and of a certain class of interests. But also there's a pertinent question: how do we produce housing policies without any data? In the absence of tenants' unions and in the absence of official demographic and housing data, This project, in fact, tries to fill this gap. So the project, entitled Mapping Beirut Through Its Tenant Stories, just a second. Okay, started in 2015, and the methodology it followed is through participatory research in a number of neighborhoods in Beirut. So 7 neighborhoods in Beirut were selected, where a complete survey of occupancy was done in participation through workshops with students, youth, and neighborhood residents. The project documented potential paths for affordable housing. We mapped rent-controlled units, but also rent in general. We mapped the landscape of housing arrangements, abandoned buildings, vacant apartments, evictions, and changes in land ownership. And of course, the research was very much rooted within a vision of actually understanding and historicizing housing in relation to neighborhoods. So housing as a socio-spatial phenomenon, not only as something provided only to provide people with shelter, while also addressing a very important question of people who are not covered by property rights. How do they live in the city? And so one of the main findings that we saw in the neighborhood investigations are actually numbers that even all state institutions that have a role in housing did not have. Some of these numbers indicate, give us a rough estimate of the percentage of old tenants, and this will make us also understand the impact of the old rent law, of the new rent law that abolished old rent contracts, and what it means in terms of impact of masses of the population. We could also understand through these pie charts that were produced from the survey, for example, the extent of empty or abandoned units, of vacant units in the city. So for example, in the neighborhood of Ras Beirut, this reached almost 20% of the 2,358 surveyed units. The research also gave a lot of insights on rent in general, and to the extent to which rent is unregulated and the ways in which it produces precarity or temporality. I will try not to go into too much details. Again, I spoke of vacancy. This is the example of mapping vacancy in Beshura, which also reached a very high percentage. And of course, some of the most important findings of these mappings were mapping evictions in these neighborhoods. This is also a map of evictions in the area surveyed in Hamra. We were also able to understand what was causing these evictions, and also understand where are people going after they were being evicted. So moving the example of one building in Hamra, some were going to Aramoun, Nabatiye, Dahi Jnubiye, and so on. So all of these really told us that people in large cities, and mainly in Beirut, were living a constant anxiety over housing stability, and they were always dealt with individually. All of these evictions or threats of evictions were always mentioned as if they were a case by case. It's something between the landlord and the tenant, whereas in fact what was happening is a mass displacement that we were unaware of, and that we're only able to see as a case-by-case basis. And this is where this project led us to set up our ongoing monitoring process through our housing monitor. The housing monitor is a platform that monitors housing vulnerabilities according to categories. These categories include inability to pay rent, inability to pay housing loan installments, eviction threats, inadequate housing conditions, vacancy, and so on. This data is gathered through a number of methods. One of the main methods is through establishing a hotline where actually we encourage citizens and city dwellers to report on these housing violations and eviction threats. The hotline has been widely distributed through posters and social media campaigns. but also through online forms that people can fill, through chat boxes, but also through partnerships with other organizations that also have access to such data. One of the main partnerships has been with the anti-racism movement on issues related to the evictions of migrant workers. And we've been accordingly producing reports, periodical reports, monthly and bi-yearly ones. So for example, one of the latest reports that spanned between September and December, it documented 177 threats of evictions, reaching 617 people. And the also shocking percentage was 62% of them were in the areas affected by the blast, despite that we have a reconstruction law that prohibits evictions within 1 year of the issuance of the law. So this constant monitoring and data production has been extremely important to understand the conditions by which people are being subject due to lack of housing, of equitable housing policies. And this takes me to how urban and land policies are generally being produced in Lebanon. And more often than not, people are deprived of channels to participate in decision-making, and the public response is always detached from city dwellers' daily suffering. As such, we have designed this project, إنتاج اللامساواة في تنظيم الأراضي اللبنانية, that actually this time, instead of looking at people's conditions, it tried to look at state data. So what we did is wanted to explore how planning is made in Lebanon. So we accessed the official gazette. We collected all master plans that were issued since 1954 until today. All of this data of every single master plan that was officially issued through a decree was mapped on this map of Lebanon. And one of the main findings we concluded is that up until today, 85% of the Lebanese territories is still unplanned. This means that Lebanese landscapes, town villages are subject to irregular construction processes. So one can build on the top of the mountain, the same as on next to a river, same as in the interior of a town, and so on. We also mapped this data of master plans along a timeline. So putting them between 1954 and 2017, which is the date when we did this project. And then we can understand the actual practice of the Directorate General of Urban Planning. So we saw that in the 15 years before the Civil War, the DGU planned 82 towns. In the 15 years after the Civil War, it only planned 28 towns, which shows a huge discrepancy in the willingness of this institution to actually plan regions. When we also started looking at how these master plans complied with the National Physical Master Plan that was issued in 2009, we saw that the 50 master plans that were issued between 2009 and 2017, not a single one of these 50 master plans mentioned or abided by the National Physical Master Plan, which shows also a high level of illegality done by the DGU itself. We also understood how decision-making is done to produce these master plans. And of course, people are absent in all the channels of consultation or participation. We were also able to access the decisions of the Higher Council of Urban Planning. Decisions of the Higher Council of Urban Planning, if they do not become decrees, they become ineffective after 3 years of their issuance. But according to this table, which shows the numbers of decisions that were not becoming decrees and they remain active, from 2003 has been skyrocketing. So in 2013 only, 35 master plans were issued through a decision, not through a decree. and hence are subject to a lot of ambiguity. They're not officially published, and a lot of changes can happen to them according to the benefits and the interests of certain individuals. The way we complemented this data gathering is also we conducted in-depth analysis in 15 towns in Lebanon on the impact of these master plans when they existed on people and places and the landscape. And of course, the conclusions were also shocking. And we also conducted seminars in the regions to actually speak about how these master plans impacted people themselves. I will not go into detail into this, but as a result of this project, we decided to establish something called the Planning Observatory, which is actually a public oversight project. So we're sort of observing state decisions in relation to planning and land use. And this monitoring process is very much the result of what we identified as the dark reality of planning in Lebanon. So throughout this whole data collection that we did, we understand how land use planning is completely dominated by the rentier economy. We understood how the National Master Plan is not being implemented. We understand how planning practice is very much about physical planning, detached from any comprehensive development, how it's a tool of the powerful, how it lacks participation, and how there is little public awareness on the work and the corruption involved in the Directorate General of Urban Planning. The project is currently under development, and it will access data through, of course, the official gazette, and through laws and issued decrees. It will go through a process of analysis, of circulating and announcing alerts, as well as publishing critical commentaries on these legislations or master plans. And of course, when we start to cross this data with different sectors, we start to see, for example, this map on the left is the map that by the National Master Plan that shows areas of national importance in terms of agriculture. And then you cross it with the master plans that have been produced, and you see the complete contradiction when you overlay such types of data. And of course, this type of data is a very important tool for local advocacy in the different Lebanese regions. So we also try through this project to break the centrality of production of data and knowledge in the capital, and to actually look at what's happening beyond the capital and in the margins that have been very much marginalized and excluded. And as such, this project is very much trying to understand the state archive and state data, to access it through different channels, and to try through it to exert pressure on how this data could be more representative to the policies that we need and to the interests of all sections of the population. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Abir,
Abir. Yes, who was talking?
It was me. I was telling Abir that we should re-meet again soon.
Great. So thank you, Abir. This really was interesting, like to see how like a research studio look for another way of gathering data and analyzing it and putting into a cause finally, not just to publish. Now we will go to another type of data, the cartography, and with Melda Salhab from Openmap Lebanon. Melda is the co-founder of Openmap Lebanon and doctoral researcher at the Center of Advanced Spatial Analysis, UCL London. Her research is focused on extracting economic insight from satellite data. Melda recently completed a project with the UNDP on the impact of the August 4th blast. As a consultant at the World Bank, she assessed global population exposure to flood risk. She's also involved with Coloring London, a crowdsourcing project to get data on the urban built environment. Previously, Melda was a management consultant at Monitor Deloitte Middle East. She has a BA in economics and master's in both urban economic development and spatial data science and visualization. Melda.
Perfect. Thanks, Rabah, and thank you to the other speakers who spoke before me. So what I'm going to try to talk about today is link back to, this urban space inventory and data production in a few different ways. So first, let me just make this full screen. I might lose seeing you guys. Okay, I can still see you, but I can't see the chat. So if there's anything, just please unmute yourself. So first, when I think about data, what is the point of data? Why are we doing this? And if we think about the most simple kind of data value chain, is, we have data and then we have insights, and then the whole point of that is we want data-driven decision making. And I think we've had some fantastic examples of that, like what Abir just showed. The point, let's say one of the projects was to see evictions and to see whether that law was being followed. And then a survey was conducted, insights were generated, and to some extent we're able to evaluate. And as well as Asad was showing, there's this pipeline that's very important to think about, because what I'm going to show you now and what I kind of urge people to keep in mind is that data is abundant. There is a lot of data out there. Some data sets are better than others. Some required specialized skill sets to get the insights that we need. But the real kind of, I'd say, bottleneck is, okay, we have these insights, we have incredible reports, like the ones that were published or shown by the previous speakers, as well as other, Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, etc. There's really an abundance of insights out there, but then it's also, how do we get that into the hands of the right people or the public to actually influence decision making? So I'm going to kind of tie into that throughout, but first, let's step back to data. And let me just check the time. Okay, I'll try to stick to that 15-minute window. Okay, so when we think about data, I think most people automatically think about an Excel spreadsheet, like a data set of this sort. This is a great example from some work we did right after the explosion, where we asked NGOs that were surveying to just tell us the locations of the households they surveyed and the extent of damage. This is extremely valuable, but it did require people going door to door to get this information. But we get this really fantastic data set that's readable, that's understood, etc. But what I kind of want to challenge you to do is to think about other forms of data as well. So, this is a bit more typical, but also perhaps left we have the Electricity of Lebanon website. So there, it's not as easy to download the data. You might not get it in this perfect spreadsheet where you have data, etc. But this data does exist. And someone in our team, Edwin Bousleiman, I'm going to show his work a bit later on. He figured out a way to using web scraping technology where you kind of read every single bit of piece of data, and then that loads into a more traditional table type format. We're able to do some really interesting analysis on electricity provision. That's an example of locally produced government data. And CAS is also a fantastic example of the source to get that. And what Asad has been doing is also an amazing way to clean up all the data that's there. And on the right, we have, I'd say, kind of one of the most common places people start when they think about data in Lebanon. They'll think about, okay, there's UN, there's World Bank, these institutions, it's trustworthy, let's go there for information. So that's a great way of doing it. This is just kind of a random example of a perception survey. They also have GDP, etc. So those data sets exist and we know them. There are limitations of it. I'm not going to get too much into the limitations and how we should account for that, but something to keep in mind as well. And then, this is just a screenshot of my Google Maps, but this is data. I mean, okay, other than the fact that you can see all the places that I've saved, which is also data. So if I was, someone analyzing restaurant behaviors, it'd be interesting to see that, user Melda has all these places saved, but also just these locations. And that's where Open Map Lebanon comes in, our kind of edge or our focus is a lot on spatial or location-based data. So here when we see, for example, that there's a hospital there and there are all these different restaurants and which ones are closed, which ones are open, opening hours, this is data and that's useful both for personal, I want to know where I want to go have dinner, but also if I take all the restaurants in Ashrafia, like that is a very, very useful data set that will enable me to do other analysis for different reasons. Same exact scene, but a satellite image. This is actually the sort of data I personally work with for my PhD research, but this is incredibly useful. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on what you can do with it, but if you just look at it quickly, what you can see is there's a lot of gray. So that's obviously urban. I mean, we know we're looking at urban scene, this is Beirut, but the gray is kind of where there's buildings. What we can do is count the number of buildings here. We could also count the number of green spaces and see, in this area or in all of Beirut, how much green space is there per capita, per population, or how much green space is there per whatever, or where is the green space? So this, just an image, a one-day image of Beirut, is an incredible source of data as well. And there's a ton you can do, and I'll show you a few examples. And then so that was a satellite image, but here's just a normal, like literally this is a picture taken by someone's phone after the blast. So I'll talk a bit more about the activities that we did as Openstreetmap Lebanon, but this is incredibly useful. So people went around taking pictures. We all saw, hundreds of volunteers on the ground taking lots of pictures. That is super useful because the first question that we needed to answer right after the explosion is, how many people were injured, where they were, and also what is the size of this problem? Were we talking about $1 million problem, a $500 million, $1 billion, $5 billion? It was really hard, and it still remains hard to answer that, seemingly simple question. So having just pictures of buildings, then, you can have human analysis, you can have machine learning analysis, look at this and say, okay, there's a substantial amount of damage here. And this is on a map. So you can see, okay, this image is, in Ashrafia versus, let's say, a building in Karantina, perhaps it was a lot more ruined. So that sort of information also opens up a world of possibilities of both insights, or generating secondary data, generating insights, and then hopefully driving decisions in terms of, let's say, where the army should go and prioritize activities, or where NGOs should do that. So that's kind of like a quick little intro. And I'm going to zoom in a bit on the Beirut explosion, which I have touched upon a bit previously. So as Openstreetmap Lebanon, so a quick introduction to us, we were founded after the Beirut explosion. We're not an NGO, nothing of that sort. We're literally just a community of people who wanted to do something. The first thing that we did was launch this crowdsourced page. I think Abir showed a really great example of a crowdsourced page before where people could record evictions. So this was all we did at the beginning was, if you needed help somewhere, you just click on the map, I'm here and I need XYZ help. But then we realized that a lot of groups on the ground were going down and surveying houses. So rather than, we kept that open, but then the use case changed to collecting information from organizations who are on the ground saying, if you are in Madam Khail in this building and you went to this household, tell us that you went to that household and preferably maybe tell us the level of damage, without any personal information. That was a whole world we had to get into in terms of data privacy, because most of us come from kind of the UK or from the US, or not come from, but we've lived and worked in those situations where data privacy and data ethics is, up here. Like I'm sure anyone who's worked, or even, whenever you submit accepted terms and conditions, that's because of very stringent data privacy laws. So we tried to replicate that as much as possible here. So, here was an example. We started getting information from NGOs and sticking on a map, and it was super, super useful for people to see, okay, that this area, let's say, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but if you count, let's say Madam Khail, has been heavily surveyed by this organization, or that, work has, started for rebuilding, etc. And this was incredibly successful. So a month into the explosion, we had about 2,000 records, and then less than a month later, we had about 20,000 records, because there was so much interest in answering yet another question of the who, what, where. So who, which organizations were doing what, surveying, were they serving economic interests? Were they serving physical stuff, like to see if you need a wall or not? So the who, the what, and the where. Very simple question, but this is super important in disaster management, and it has to be mobilized very, very quickly. So that's one of the things that we kind of got into, and I think was kind of like our, claim to fame in a way. But another thing that we did, and this kind of ties back to what I showed you before about that image, is that we launched this big volunteer campaign. We saw that people were on the ground taking pictures, sweeping up glass. Well, if you're taking pictures, rather than just have the pictures saved to your camera roll, why don't you use this app called Mobilized? It's an open source website, open for the world, where when you take a picture, it records the location. And then when you get home and connect to Wi-Fi, it automatically uploads to the map with the location. We had an insane amount of submissions. Sometimes it was just, one person randomly walking around, and then some people would pick up this crowdsourcing bug where I think we had over 1,000 images from a single user, because he's just this is my contribution to the boss. And he went and just took a picture of every single building in a certain area. This data, since it's open and Mobilized is a known website in certain communities, we kept finding out later, there was a Red Cross group in Luxembourg or somewhere random that used this to help figure out how much aid they should then send to Lebanon. The army, when they were double checking the work they have, they would go and say, okay, this is a building here, let's check the Mobilized image to see if it corresponds to the data. Maybe they're saying there's minor damage, but the image shows, that's actually very major damage. I mean, this was an incredible useful source of data, and it was just people, providing information, and then anyone who needed it could go get it. So that was pretty cool. Another thing is kind of, I think, the advantage of a community and kind of connecting people, and that's something I'd like to say, it's kind of a great thing of what we're doing here, is once we start meeting different people, collaborations happen. So the first map on all the local news channels was something like this. This, I'm sure you've seen some version of it. There were 5 different versions at the end. And this was produced by NASA using a type of satellite data, not the kind of typical Google Maps one, a different one called radar data, which is very sensitive to changes. So they look at how Beirut looked like before and how Beirut looked like after, and then where there were changes or vibrations, you can record it, which means there was likely damage. So this is great. The problem with the type of data that they have, the really raw data, is it's not very clean. So they need some information from the ground to calibrate it, to kind of make it give better predictions. So this team from NASA kind of heard of all the stuff that we were doing, and they basically joined our community. And it was a really incredible collaboration where, using the public data that was there, they helped improve this map. And this map was the primary kind of damage assessment map that was used by local organizations, international organizations, UN, people trying to work towards open data. And even they were able to improve their kind of model that generates this map, because they work in the Nepal earthquake, they work in disasters all the time. And they said that the disaster in Beirut, because of all this grassroots effort that came, was the most data-rich disaster they'd ever worked on. And they've worked on, I think it was 90 to date. And they were able to improve their models to help other explosions or other events that happen in the world. So it's also kind of cool to see that we're not only impacting what's happening in Lebanon, but what we're doing, what we can be doing as a community, can have lessons learned for other places as well, which I think is pretty cool. And then kind of all of that put together. So now if you go to Beirut Recovery, I think .org, I can share the website in the chat in a bit. We tried to put everything together, including data we got from the Lebanese Red Cross, etc. This was a collaboration with Rice University and AUB Urban Lab to create this kind of interactive map where you could click on a building and see damage. We're hoping to get this additional information. Has it been repaired? Has it not been? Do a quick time check. Okay, I'm gonna zoom through the rest. So that's a bit on the blast. I'm happy to answer questions there. Just want to highlight a few other interesting use cases. So one, I told you about satellite data, and this is actually my own personal research. So here, this is something I did for a dissertation a while back, using kind of really not complicated machine learning and stuff, and just creating this data set of, okay, this pin right here is water and this pin right here is forest, etc. Then you could classify images to see how Lebanon looks like. So this is Lebanon 2016. The red is all the urban areas. What's great is that the data that I use, Landsat, It's this data set that has been around since the 1970s. So theoretically, what I was trying to do at the time is to see what has been the urbanization rate from the 70s till now. So we could look at, and it's by pixel. This is like a 30-meter pixel. So literally pixel by pixel for all of Lebanon, where there used to be forest and now there's urban, where it used to be water and now there's urban, or how the water bodies changed over time. Like these are things, I'm just kind of showing you this as, you know, what we can do. Like really our imagination is our limitation when it comes to this stuff. Another cool thing, so, you know, we thought about satellite data as images, but another thing is there's a sensor that orbits the Earth and just collects the amount of nitrogen dioxide. I am not a chemist. I know nothing about what nitrogen dioxide is or whatever. All I know is that it's created by power plants and by cars. So this was a really popular thing around COVID. As you know, when we had a lockdown in April versus February. So you can see the amount, this is Lebanon and that's like Egypt. So you can see the amount of NO2 change, and there's a ton that you can do with that to see how effective a lockdown is. Other than just like, it's a really scary amount of air pollution. Let's not even go there, but you know, that information is there and there's really cool stuff you can do. I'm gonna just touch on a couple final things before handing back over to you. But like I mentioned, Google Maps, a really great place is Openstreetmap. And we try to do a lot of work updating Openstreetmap. So it's basically like Google Maps, but any of us can edit it and any of us can download the entire data set. So if you wanted to count, let's see how many pharmacies there are in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood, or how far pharmacies are to each other in Beirut. Maybe, you know, there's a weird cluster here if you look at the P's, but maybe there's this huge area here without a single pharmacy. Like, why is that? That's a really interesting question. So you could go to OpenStreetMap and download the data and answer that question. What we did do as OpenMap Lebanon in collaboration with OpenStreetMap is we got 54,000 buildings mapped. So see here how each building has a square. Those are people actually drawing squares using imagery. So on the outskirts of Beirut, we had people internationally actually just help map a ton of buildings, which is super useful. So now if you wanted to see how many buildings there are in like Abda or Alay, that's now been mapped. So we have that information. This is all volunteers, you know, generating this data and then someone else checking it because, you know, the validation supports it. I showed you this earlier. So Amarun in our group as well, there's a really cool thing. So I'd encourage you to go to this link. He scraped all this data and did some really cool analysis about electricity provision, you know, all this green. This was unfortunately in the past. If we look at 2021, I doubt it would be as good, but you can see a lot of red here because electricity provision obviously went down. But, you know, this was an unconventional data source that a lot was done with as well. And I think this is one of the last things, but kind of what I wanted to touch on. So what Maroon did and what a lot of people did as well is, you know, we have government provided data, we have these sources, but once you combine different data sets together, you find really interesting results. So here, what we ended up using was data for good from Facebook. So whether we liked it or not, you know, our phones record our location all the time. Either through Facebook or different apps. And then those organizations then aggregate it. So your privacy is protected. So let's say at the Beirut level, but they tell you how many people kind of, let's say here have been moving or staying in place. So, you know, this shows us when there was no lockdown, there was a lot of movement. And then we had a partial lockdown, we can see how it changed. So this is a great way to see the effectiveness of the lockdowns. And we can see this across Lebanon. So I didn't put that here, but if you go onto our Instagram page or our website, you'll find really cool analysis of how you could use like Facebook data to do very granular, in-depth analysis on, you know, the government's policies and whether people are following it, whether they're not, whether they're following it like Zahle versus wherever. So just one other example of kind of data to insights, and the whole point of this is hopefully data-driven decision-making. This is one kind of final thing I want to highlight. So when we do get data, and the nice thing about when you have two different data sets is you can check them, right? Because, you know, it's very hard to trust any data set blindly unless you have something to validate it on. It's very risky to trust any data set blindly for decision making. So at some point, we're collaborating with the disaster risk management unit. Don't quote me on that, but the unit and the government that's responsible for a lot of the COVID data that we're seeing like on TV. So what we saw is like, first thing, we were shocked that the total population for Lebanon was over 10 million, which we all know is not true. The old census might put us around here. More reasonable statistics put us at the 6.8 mark. So we compared that to Facebook population estimates, and that's based on satellite imagery. It's based on, you know, number of users, a whole bunch of different things. And it's pretty well documented and very, very good methodology, I think, out of Columbia University. Their population is kind of at this 5.8 million. We see a huge, huge discrepancy. And this is really risky. Like, if you remember those COVID maps that they were putting on TV, if anyone who was here in Lebanon, that shows like yellow, red, green, that was showing like the percentage of people who had COVID versus the population of an area. So when Beirut was very high, it's like there are a ton of people in Beirut with COVID relatives. So that means if you were in that area, there was a lot of community transmission happening. What we saw is that the base population was completely incorrect. Like if we look at Zahle, for example, the government statistics at the time was that there are 245,000 people living in Zahle and in this tiny area, which is very unlikely to be true. The Facebook one was about 70,000. Not sure where the real one lies, but this is important. So I mean, this at least asks the question, like this leads to something. Let us then figure out what is actually the population. You can use whatever estimate, the number of houses in the region. You know, you can ask the local municipality, just so we have a rough idea. So when we are planning vaccination programs, when we are planning to lock down an area or not lock down, we need to have this base of, you know, decently accurate data. So I'm going to end here. So who are Openstreetmap Lebanon? This is just a screenshot from one of our calls. We're really such a random group of people, completely different skill sets. Some people from NGOs, some people Lebanese, some people not, but we're all kind of committed to this idea of we want to generate more data, find interesting data, ask the right questions, and push that out to the public. Happy to talk more. Feel free to shoot me an email and stay connected with us. And yeah, I think I've definitely gone over time, but just a few final thoughts is, you know, one, data is all around us, just be creative, it's there. Figuring out the right questions is the most important thing, I'd say. And yeah, the whole open data insights decision-making, because we really need that decision-making part, I think, to work. I'm sure everyone on this call would agree. I'm gonna stop there and hand back over to you.